Good evening and warm welcome to all the participants. We are joined by a very big personality, as you can see, Mr. Gurcharan Das. This is like I'm pinching myself. Is this reality or a dream? And then I also managed to speak to him in the evening around 4 p.m. And I said it is a reality and it's going to really happen. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sri Gurcharan Das. Welcome, sir. Good evening to this conversation. This is the 202nd leadership conversation on WiseViews platform. I'll share my screen and do a brief introduction if you permit, sir. Yeah, these are WiseViews leadership conversations which we hold every Friday. And this is 202nd, as I mentioned. And this is the topic, Make a Life, Not Just a Living. And this is going to be led by Mr. Gurcharan Das. So this introduction I will make right away. Mr. Gurcharan Das is a distinguished author, commentator, and former CEO of Procter & Gamble India. So in his long journey of profession, after a successful career in business, leading Procter & Gamble India and Southeast Asia, and later serving as managing director of Procter & Gamble Worldwide, he retired early to pursue a writing career. Today, he is one of India's most celebrated authors and thinkers, best known for two iconic bestsellers, The Difficulty of Being Good and India Unbound, which have shaped public discourse on India's economic and social transformation. His newspaper columns are among the most widely read in India. His latest books are a memoir, Another Sort of Freedom, and Dilemma of Indian Liberal. He graduated in philosophy with honors from Harvard University, where he was later inducted in Phi Beta Kappa for high attainments in liberal scholarship. I struggled with the pronunciation of Phi Beta Kappa for some time.
It's perfectly fine.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I'll also make a brief introduction of my colleague, Dr. R. Prasad. He is the Senior Director of Academic Wing in ICFAI Group. He brings 3 decades of rich experience as an entrepreneur, later as a corporate professional, and now as a senior academic at ICFAI. He holds BTech from IIT Bombay and PGDM from IIM Kolkata. Welcome, Professor Prasad, and I'll stop sharing the screen here. So we want to keep as much time as possible to listen to you, sir. I vividly recall some 25 years back, you were in my class at IIM Bangalore. You led a session, very, very important session. And I can understand how magical it can be. And therefore, we brought this to the benefit of large number of people today. Over to you, sir. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Sudhakar Rao, or I should say Professor Sudhakar Rao. Now, I'm going to speak to you about making a life versus making a living. And I go back to my earliest memory when I was 4 years old, and I was in kindergarten, and I brought home a report card. And the report card, my mother, I saw me smiling with the report card, and so she was waiting at the door, and she asked me, "Did you stand first?" And my father was behind her, and he said to her, "That was the wrong question. Ask him what he likes about school. Ask him what he does well in school. Does he tell stories? Does he like stories? Does he draw pictures? What interests him? Who are his friends?" And so at that moment, that dialogue between my mother and my father actually created this purpose of the subject of this talk, which is my mother was concerned with my making a living, and my father was concerned with my making a life. And so, we were a middle class family, and my father was an engineer with the government. Those were the only jobs in those days. And I can only say that this theme continued right through my life. And the reason I bring this up to you today, that because I'm going to tell you my story. I've just finished writing a memoir called Another Sort of Freedom. And this book actually it's fresh in my mind, the stories of my growing up. And so I'll borrow from that to tell you that the next turning point was, I mean, by the way, this continued year after year, despite my father's coaching my mother uh, to worry about making a life. She was always concerned, telling me, work hard, come first, etc., etc. And I was not typical. Frankly, we all we all grow up in with that sort of upbringing, especially if we are middle class, and we are expected to do well in school, and then we do well in school, then we are expected to go to a good college, and then we are expected to get a job, and then we're expected to get married, have children, and then repeat the same process with the children until we get to in our 40s sometimes, and we ask ourselves, is this what life was all about? So, coming back to my own life, I'm going to jump from the age of 4 to the age of 17, and I have had the unbelievable good luck of getting a scholarship to Harvard University to do an undergraduate degree. And I'm at Palam Airport. My mother's got tears in my eyes as my parents are saying goodbye to me. The Air India flight is waiting, I remember. And my mother is saying, in between her tears, make sure you study something useful. Why don't you be like your father? Become an engineer. India needs engineers. And so you'll get a job. That was her concern. And my father, he again says to my mother and to me, now remember, you also have to make a life. So why don't you go to Harvard and make a life through books and read what books you want to read? And so I arrived at Harvard. My plane landed safely. I arrived in Boston and I went to college. And on the first day, I signed up at the dean's office that I was going to become an engineer. That's what they wanted to know, what was my major. I had a roommate who was studying Russian literature. And one day at lunch, and he was reading a book, a famous novel by Tolstoy called Anna Karenina. And he's full of the book, and he says to me at lunchtime, Gurcharan, if one day you have an affair with a married woman, it should be somebody like Anna Karenina. And then he starts to catalog the virtues of Anna Karenina. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not fair, yaar. This guy's dreaming of sleeping with Anna Karenina, and here I am calculating pipe friction, mugging up Bernoulli's equations. Something is wrong. So I went charging into the dean's office and I cut out engineering. And then the next semester, I shifted, I studied a course in Greek tragedy, Roman history. Then I took a course in Renaissance painting. Over the next 2 years, I came back to India once and I was discovered the poverty of India. You'd have to go abroad to discover. So when I came back, I took economic history of capitalism, and I even studied Sanskrit love poetry. Now, that was because, when you go abroad, you become an ambassador of your country, and people ask you all kinds of questions. So I thought I would learn some Sanskrit to answer some of those questions. Anyway, finally, in my junior year, even Harvard got worried and said, now you better declare a major and you better take minimum courses and write your thesis on that in your major. So the dean asked, what would you like to study? what is your major? I said, philosophy. And he said, why? And I said, I want to be happy. I want to learn what is happiness. And of course, I had taken courses in Plato and Aristotle, and I'd loved those courses. But he said, now that's the first time somebody gave me an answer of that type, but I guess it makes sense. Anyway, I graduated in philosophy from Harvard and got a scholarship to Oxford to do a PhD in philosophy. I was home for the summer at my parents' house in Chandigarh. My father was working for the government and he had a house there. And and one evening I was kind of lazing around in the park and I looked at the sky and I said, do I really want to spend the rest of my life at that stratosphere of abstract thought? No, I wanted a life of action. Now, I didn't quite know what that life was, but I quietly wrote to Oxford and to say I'm not coming. And they were nice enough to say, well, if you want to come back in a few years' time, you write to us and let us know. Anyway, my mother's worst nightmare came true. She had a grown-up son at home, Vela. We call Vela in Punjabi, which means idle, nothing, doing nothing. And so, and we had a nosy neighbor, and she used to come and sort of ask my mother every few days, and what is your son doing? And my mother would get embarrassed, and she said, I don't know. And so, and so I saw her face and I got very embarrassed. Meanwhile, I was reading a book recommended to me called The Mouse Merchant. Now, Mouse Merchant I must take a minute or two to tell you the story. The mouse, because it changed my life. The Mouse Merchant is the story of the first startup in Indian history, I think. It must have been one of the first. But it's a story. Now, we are living in an age of startups. That's why I'm telling you the story. And some of you you want to do a startup. So the story, it's 13th century story. It was in Sanskrit, although I read it and translated in it's from the book called Katha Sarit Sagara, and it is sorry, it's 12th or 13th century. Anyway, long time ago, more than 1,000 years ago, and it's about a boy who grows up, and he's 17 years old, and his mother's they're poor. His mother cleans houses to make a living, and so she says to him, now I've educated you, and now you've got to make your own life. But you are not going to do what I do. You're going to make your bigger destiny. So she says, the richest man in town lives over there, lives over there. You go and ask him for advice. He's a good man and he'll give you advice on what to do. So I go there, and the next morning, this boy goes there, and while he's waiting for the big man to come out, asks, he sees a dead mouse. And when the man comes out, the boy asks him, can I take that mouse? And the man says, but people come to me to ask for a job or for a loan. Don't you want anything? The boy says, no, just the dead mouse. The rich man says, well, you're doing me a favor. And so the boy goes away. He knows a widow who lives not far away, and she has a cat. And he sells the dead mouse as cat food to the widow. And the few paisa she gives him, he goes to the bazaar, he buys some chana, spicy chana, chana chor garam, makes pudiyas out of it, takes a ghara of water, pani, and goes to the town square and he waits. In the afternoon, he knows that loggers will come from the forest carrying logs of wood on their head, and they rest in the square before they go to sell their logs in the timber market. And that time, this boy gives each one a glass of water, and he gives each one a pack of that snack that he has got. Nobody has ever done this to them. They're very happy, but they have no money. So each one gives him a log of wood. And so the next day, he sells that log, one log, and brings better spices, more better chana. And then he repeats this for 3 months until the monsoon rains come and the logging stops. And then the price in the timber market begins to rise. This boy has a house full of logs. He starts unloading his logs slowly, and he has made a killing. He's got enough money to buy a timber shop by the end of the season. And so he sets himself up as a timber merchant. And he has one competitive advantage, that the suppliers of wood, the loggers, they know him and they like him and they remember him. So they go to him first with the best wood that they have. And so he prospers. But after a couple of years, he realizes that there's more money to be made in converting the wood rather than selling it. To convert the wood so he meets a carpenter who's a shipbuilder. So he says, I'll make you my partner and you make a ship for me. He has made a ship before. And so he diversifies and goes into the shipbuilding business, and he's successful at that. And in a year, another few years, he discovers actually there's more money in shipping rather than shipbuilding. And so he finds an old retired captain of a ship and he makes him his partner, finances him, starts a third business. And so now he is a successful shipper, sending his ships all over the place. And by the ripe old age of 25, he's the richest man in town. And he goes to a jeweler and asks him to make me a mouse, a gold mouse. And so he takes that 24-carat gold mouse to the richest man in town, and he tells him, in today's language, he would say, this is your return on investment for the capital that you gave me, which was the dead mouse. And the old man is flabbergasted to hear the story that he gives his daughter in marriage to this boy. That's the end of the story. Now, this book inspired me, and I said, there's another way to live. And my mother was very nervous at this time because, she was unhappy that I didn't have a job. And so I answered the first advertisement in the paper because I thought I must learn something about business. And it was a company that made Vicks Vapor Rub. And later that company became Procter and Gamble India. And they interviewed me. I knew nothing about business, but I had the name Harvard in my resume, in my CV. And I guess that's why they thought they'll give me a job. I got the job. And so I had started a third career. First, I was going to be an engineer. Then I was going to be a philosophy professor. And now I was in business and then suddenly from a philosopher in the ivy-covered halls of high learning and up in clouds, I was walking the dusty bazaars of India selling Vicks Vapor Rub. Aaj ek dozen ek free, I would say, and sell that's how I got my training at Vicks. So this is to continue. I'm just thinking the time is running out. And Mr. Rao has only given me another 6 minutes and I have a long way to go. But to cut the long story short, I I worked, soon after I got working, and I did well. I did well at my work. I applied myself, but I got bored. I mean, I didn't find the excitement that I found excitement of ideas when I was studying. And so my father gave me a good advice, which was, now he said, you can make a life on the weekend. You work from Monday to Friday. You work at Monday to Friday at PNG, but on Saturday and Sunday, why don't you do something that you really gives you a lot other form of pleasure, something that you like? And so one Sunday morning, I sat down. I was 22, 23 years old. I sat down to write a play. And I said to myself, to give myself some josh, it must have been a morning like this when Shakespeare too sat down to write Hamlet. Now, a sane person doesn't talk like that, but I was not very sane. But I had started a second. The play did very well, by the way. It got performed, it got produced. Alec Padamsee produced it in Bombay, and it was produced abroad, and so on. And I had a confidence to write another play, which was on Mirabai, and it was produced off Broadway in New York, because by then the company had transferred me there to New York at their headquarters. And the director set the Meera bhajans to hard rock music, which I thought was fantastic, captured the spirit of Mirabai and Bhakti, and her love for Krishna. Anyway, to long and story short is that next 25 years I wore two hats, a Monday to Friday hat and a Saturday Sunday hat. 5 days, 2 days. And this is how I survived until, I won't tell you, I had a midlife crisis. You have to read, you have to read my book, Another Sort of Freedom, to find out what kind of crisis it was. But at 50, I said, enough is enough. And I was going to do something else. But luckily, I could fall back on Saturday, Sunday career, and I became a full-time writer. So for the last 30 years, I've been a writer. For 30 years, I was a business executive. And by the time I quit, I had been CEO of the Indian company, CEO of Southeast Asia, and then managing director, Procter& Gamble Worldwide for strategic planning. And so we had a nest egg. My wife and I had saved some money. So I tried to persuade her that she would not get a salary check at the end of the month, but we would be able to be comfortable, although our standard of living won't go up anymore. And she was a good sport, and she agreed with me, and I settled down to become a writer. So for the last 30 years, I've been a writer. Now, I don't want to suggest that you have to have two jobs, etc., to become a writer. I mean, to make a life. But in a way, Dr. Rao and Dr. Prasad are going to ask me some questions, and maybe I can answer some of the lessons that I have learned from these two careers. And how is this something that could be useful to all of you? So it's approaching 7 o'clock. I will tell you in the question and answer, I will also tell you, when I say you don't have to quit your job, I will tell you a story of one person who worked with me in my company, who made his life at the job. I may have made it in two ways and made my life, but he made it at his company. And so we'll talk about happiness, meaning of life, and what really is this all about. So I'll stop there, and turn it back to Dr. Rao now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Even I forgot to trace the time when you started telling those stories. The personal stories starting from the age of 4 to now very close to 80. I think it is unfair for us to put a time limit on this. Now I realize, but at least you managed to give the canvas and some important highlights of how you have moved from aspiring to be an engineer and from there to being a philosopher and from there of course a business executive and then a playwright and finally a celebrated author that you are now. So amazing, sir, amazing journey. uh, but a lot of people would have told you, but I'll say this once again, that it is actually magical listening to you. Very nice way of as if someone has graduated in telling a story at Harvard. So it's so good. So thank you so much. And I also would like to make a compliment here. Your your study room, the innumerable number of books that you have behind you is pretty impressive. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And without much ado, we will get into the Q&A. I request Professor Prasad to join. And before that, I want to thank all the distinguished members who have joined today from all walks of life, all professions, and all age groups and all cities from India. I welcome Dr. Mahendra Reddy, who has joined. I welcome Krishna Rao Garu, who has joined. Muralidhara, who has joined from Bangalore, Dr. Amit Badra from Bombay, and Benedict from Bangalore. Thank you, Benedict, for connecting us or reconnecting us to Gurcharan Das, sir. So thank you, sir. Over to Professor Prasad for your first cluster of questions.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Sir, indeed a great pleasure to see in flesh and blood, though virtually, a person who has written books that one is fond of reading. And therefore, your presence is much more than any of the other speakers that one may have met. And perhaps I think, given the name that we are given, WiseViews, I think you have really manifested that not just at the work that you've done, but also the kind of writing that you've produced with insights in such a crisscross manner across various wisdoms in the world. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. I will start with the first question. It is connected to what you've said, and partially you have covered the response to the question, but I'll put the question because you can then build on it and give us more perspective. What are the major factors which have influenced your making of life? And for perspective, how does that differ from that of your father, or you were referring to a colleague in your presentation?
Well, I've talked to you about two big influences in my life. My mother, who wanted me to make a living, and I fulfilled her desire also. I made a living. But I also fulfilled my father's desire that I make a life. Now, I think we should ask ourselves, what is it? What is making a life? And what was it that made me pursue my father's wish against the conventional? My mother's was a very conventional middle class anxiety that I should be able to look after the family, bread and butter, earn enough to support a family. So I think the making a life the fact is that most of us sleepwalk through life. We listen to what everybody's telling us, and we are not Mozart. Mozart, at the age of 3, knew he was a genius, a musical genius. And he knew by the age of 5 he had written his first symphony. So we're not like that. We kind of stumble through life the way I stumbled through life. Started to study engineering and then switched to philosophy. In between, did Sanskrit. And then, when time from philosophy, I was ready to go make an academic career, promising academic career. I switched. Thanks to the mouse merchant, I was inspired. I switched. Let's try out what the business world is, and did that. And then also at the same time, more started as a hobby, but I began a second career as a weekend career, as a weekend writer, in which I wrote 3 plays, a novel, and all those. I was lucky. I think if you do anything you do well, then you give yourself options. The way I had an option to retire at 50, quit the world at 50. So that's one sort of point I want to highlight. And the second point I want to highlight, Dr. Prasad, is that how do you know you're making a life? And the way you know you're making a life is when time gets distorted, meaning that you say suddenly, oh my God, it's already 6 o'clock in the evening. And I thought it was only 4 o'clock. So for 2 hours, yourself disappeared. So in that process, it's very important. One way to know you're making a life is yourself keeps disappearing. You are doing something you're so absorbed in that you don't think, and it's a bit. Let me remind so many of the listeners, one of our national heroes is Tendulkar, the cricketer. And when he was approaching his double century, that was at the end of his career, one of the great batting centuries that he ever did. A reporter asked him in the end, after he came out, how did it feel like when you were approaching your double century? And Tendulkar's answer was, I don't know. I wasn't even there. The bat had become so big by then, and the ball had become so big that the bat just had to hit the ball. And so what he's saying is that his identity had disappeared. His identity had disappeared. So when your self disappears, you're what the athletes call, you're in the zone. You're in, a psychologists call it flow. You're in flow. And so I can only say that for the last 30 years, I've been coming in this room every morning at 6 o'clock, and I write from 6 to 12. And I don't do email in the morning. I don't do WhatsApp in the morning. I don't even answer the phones. My secretary comes, answers the phone. I don't meet my secretary. And I don't do yoga. I don't read the newspaper. I don't do anything that will put me on someone else's agenda. I think that's the point. And so if you're in that spirit, then I think you are making your life because you're not there. This book I wrote, Another Sort of Freedom, my memoir, I dedicated to people in the beginning. The dedication reads, to the happy few. Let me just read it. It reads, to the happy few who don't take themselves too seriously. I think that is the secret. It's also the secret of happiness. The happiness is caused by too much concern with yourself. A happy person basically loves his work and he loves the person he lives with. 2-point agenda. Love your work and love the person you live with. Bas, you're on your way. So that's what I would give my listeners, a long answer to your short question.
Excellent, sir. I think you have highlighted a number of points. Anything done well should come to our notice, and we can possibly work on it. The other is, the concept of flow and the self disappearing, which is an indicator of that's something done well at a very different level. And then I think, not taking oneself too seriously. In the middle, you also put the aspect of focus. I think all these put together do give good insights into when this happens. And I think I'll connect that to the next question now, which is about, you mentioned that, a lot of us sleepwalk, some of us stumble, and very, very few of us get on to that very directly. So this question is connected to that. So it's subconscious, instinctual for many. Now, if I have to look at it from raising the consciousness point of view, we are educators, so we have a certain interest in doing that as well. How does one become aware of this? You have touched on it in the previous response, but I'll further the question. How does one explore this even further based on one's strengths and potentials? What is the role of education and educators in this? This is the first part of the question, sir.
Well, unfortunately, I did not listen to my educators and teachers. And I also, I took a few risks in life. You've got to be able to, there's a voice inside you. I mean, when I quit engineering because my roommate was studying Anna Karenina, and I quit philosophy because of the mouse merchant. I mean, I was not. In other words, we are given a conventional paths by our teachers, by our parents, by society, and sometimes you should listen to your own voice and say to your voice. I mean, I wasn't enjoying engineering, Bernoulli's equations and pipe friction and all that, and so I think. And also, I think one should develop a certain confidence in oneself that one has a voice. Luckily, I had a father who was supporting these crazy ideas. When my mother heard, when I was at Harvard, and my mother heard that I was studying Sanskrit at Harvard, she said, "Hi, hi, mera munda," and she'd say, "A dead language. Now only the dead will give him a job." That was her answer. And my father was there to reassure her. But ultimately, I think one has to listen to one's own voice, take a few risks. It was a bit crazy to go to Harvard to study Sanskrit. I mean, a sensible person doesn't do that. But it happened. And so, what I want to just say to you is that what I want to tell people, and maybe also educators, that we should give a little more space to our students and give them. My advice to teachers would be to try and find out what the student wants, to try to uncover, as my father told my mother at the age of 4, when I was 4. And really, of course, the other aspect, which was to not take yourself too seriously, came actually as advice. Dr. Rao, believe it or not, came as advice from my father's guru. Now, I must tell you the story that my name used to be Ashok Kumar. Ashok Kumar. Nice name, Prince of Happiness, Ashok Kumar. But my grandmother suspected that my mother had given me that name because she thought my mother was secretly in love with a Bollywood actor named Ashok Kumar. Now, I don't know whether you remember this, you're probably still too young, but in the 1940s, Ashok Kumar was like Shah Rukh Khan and today, I mean, big Bollywood. He was a big Bollywood star, and all the women were in love with him. And so was my mother, I'm sure. But so my grandmother said, "This is not right. We can't call him Ashok Kumar." So she took me to her guru and she asked the guru to give this boy a name. And the guru, she put me at his feet, and because he was sitting up on the platform, and she put me at his feet, and she said, "Now give this boy a name." And the guru said, "Well, you put him there, ਬੀਬੀਏ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਪਾਇਆ ਹੈ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਬੁਲਾਵਾਂਗੇ Gurcharan Das, in Punjabi," he said. And so overnight, I was transformed from the Prince of Happiness to the humble servant of the feet of the Guru, which is what Gurcharan Das means. And many years later, when I was grown up, I asked the Guru, I said, why did you give me that name? Ashok Kumar was such a good, nice name. And he said, well, son, it's good to be reminded of humility in your life. And then he gave me the best definition of humility that I have ever heard, and what I have just told you, which became the dedication of my book. He said, take your work seriously, but not yourself seriously. And that was that idea of living lightly, not taking yourself too seriously. You know, there's a Sanskrit word called laghima. Laghima means lightness. Patanjali uses it in the Yoga Sutras. It's one of the siddhis, perfections. And so what he was saying was that you want to be happy, you want to live, make a life. I didn't use those words, but that's where I come from. I come from that learning of living lightly. You know, in our culture, the gods play. It's called Leela. God's play, divine play, is called Leela. Krishna Leela, Ram Leela. We celebrate them. And what are they doing? Shiva. Shiva is dancing and he creates the universe. Krishna is dancing with the gopis, 100,000 gopis for one Brahma night, which is 3.4 billion years, by the way. And a lot of dancing. And so I think let's learn from our gods. Let's not take ourselves too seriously. And that's part of the learning from making a life.
Thank you, sir. I think excellent points. Listen to your own voice, taking risks, giving space to students, not taking yourself very seriously. I'll take a third question, sir. This is connected to your other works. And how do you, I mean, you've touched upon it to some extent as far as the personal context goes, but this is also connected to the same question, how shall I live? How do you bring in the one's personal context, including the family and the four Purusharthas? You have written 2 books on 2 of them. Excellent books, sir. Excellent books. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha into this thought process. Is there any connection to it? Are there any insights?
Well, I would only say I gave you a definition of happiness, which actually I stole from Freud. Freud said that first. Happiness is to love your work and love the person you live with. But now I've discovered, and you pointed out, that I've written on the 4 Purusharthas. First one was Artha, which was India unbound. Dharma was difficulty of being good. Kama was the riddle of desire. And moksha is another sort of freedom. So if you live without taking yourself too seriously, that's my idea of moksha, a secular moksha, nothing to do with other afterlife or anything. I don't know if there's an afterlife. So my point is that each of these 4, Artha is material well-being, Dharma is moral well-being, Kama is emotional and sexual well-being, and the 4th is moksha, is spiritual well-being. All these 4 are human potentialities. They're human capabilities. We are capable of all these. If you fulfill these capabilities, you can be happy, you can live a flourishing life. That is also making a definition of making a life based on the Purusharthas, treating them as human capabilities that you fulfill.
Excellent, sir. I think this is fantastic. And you have connected it to your books. And I'm sure that this will also motivate us to read those books. I think I'll hand it back to Professor Rao. This has been wisdom of a very high order. After all the backing that you have in corporate life, initially I used to know you as the PNG CEO, but I think the the difficulty of being good changed the perspective completely, and what you've written thereafter also. Thank you very much, sir. It's been an enlightening session. I hand it back to Professor Rao.
Thank you very much. From here, we'll change the rules, sir. We will also forget the time. We want to extract maximum from you, and let's see how many questions we can take. But I will also not ask all the questions that I have prepared for. I'll just take one question and then open the mic for the audience to directly talk to you. I think I'll follow that. So the only question that I'm going to ask you is, we see in real life, we see people in the mad rush to actually achieve milestones. They are not learning to pause. How can you help, or how can you advise them how to learn to pause and reconnect with the purpose that they are for, both for themselves, also for the organizations? I think that mad rush has to stop. Mad rush has to take a break.
Well, that's a difficult question, Dr. Rao. And frankly, before I undertake to answer that question, I was just reminded for your listeners in Hyderabad that, and since you reminded me, Benedict is on this line, there is a business literary festival on August the 2nd. So this is a commercial break, and I'm honored to be present there. And what I'll be talking about, actually something very different. Apart from these books that I have written, I have also edited and curated a series of 15 volumes on history of Indian business, history of the Indian economy. And this, I'll be talking about this at 1 o'clock in Knowledge City.
Tea Hub.
The Tea Hub, that's what it's called, where the event is. So that's a commercial break. But to answer your question, I would just say how. Well, I think the best way for me to answer is to give you another story. Because I don't know if there's a simple way I can tell from my life, but let me give you another life. And that was somebody who worked in my company. And I was by then the CEO of the company. And this chap came as a security guard for the night shift. And so he came from a village. His name was Kamble. I tell this story in my memoir at great length because I think he was a very special person. And this fellow didn't know much English. He was, after all, a night security guard at night. But in the very first few days, we all realized that this guy was different. He was, for the first time, he had come to the big city. Any machine that he saw, he fell in love with. So the first day, he discovers the coffee making machine and the tea making machine, and he tests it out and makes coffee and serves coffee to everybody on his rounds that he does as a security guard. The next day, he discovers the telex machine. Now, those days, we sent telexes to each other. And so this guy wants to try it out. So in the daytime, he learns English. Others sleep in the daytime. This guy learns English. And within a few weeks, within a few months, he's sending test messages by telex. And more than that, there's other qualities about him. He was helpful to everybody, anybody, and he became so useful to anyone that if you had a question in the evening shift, you said, ask Kamble, and he would give you. One day I wanted to know, I need to talk to the finance director. He was not available. And so somebody said, ask Kamble. So I asked Kamble. Kamble calls his home and discovers he's in Delhi at the Ashoka Hotel where there's a meeting the following day. And so he finds out the room number and he calls Ashoka, and he suddenly gets, within 5 minutes, I'm connected. And so I can give you many, many instances of this fellow. He had a certain integrity about him, a certain helpfulness, a service orientation that we don't not normally expect. And so one day, our telephone operator told us that she's going on maternity leave and she's going to have a baby. And so we had to find another temporary replacement for her. And Kamble volunteered because he went to tell the personnel manager that, look, I'm tired of working at night. Give me a chance. And that fellow, our personnel head, says, Kamble, are you crazy? We are a multinational company. We get calls from around the world, and you can hardly speak English. You can't. And how will you do? You can't do that job. And so I heard about this. I mean, Kamble went away with a long face and sad. And I heard this story. But by then Kamble had become such a legend in the evening shift that more and more people were staying on in the evening because everything worked in the evening. And I knew that Kamble had answered the phones in the evening by this time. And so I told the personnel guy, I said, give him a chance, give him a couple of days, have a backup ready, and if Kamble doesn't work out, we'll have someone else do the job. And sure enough, I see Kamble on the job the next day, and he's very happy. And in the afternoon, the company lawyer calls me and he says, Gurcharan, do you have a new EPBX machine? I said, why do you ask that? He said, well, in the old days, before this, uh, your phone was only answered on the fifth or the sixth ring. And now I got answered. I've called 3 times your office for 3 jobs, and immediately I got connected in the second ring. So at lunchtime, I went and asked Kamble, I said, why do you answer the phone so quickly? He said, he gave me the best answer you can imagine. He said, there may be a customer on the other side to give an order, and I don't want the company to lose an order. Imagine this guy's not done an MBA, but he understood that the company survived because of its customers. And this guy gave that answer. Anyway, I could go on and on because Kamble then actually did very well in the company. He rose and he was somebody. I mean, I can now remember. He's no more, but I can now remember that every job that he got, he did very well. So now my point about the story is that this guy loved his work so much that he would have paid us to come to work, you see. And that is the beginning of making a life. That you have to, I mean, we spend 8-10 hours a day working. More than a third of our lives goes in working. And there was a study done in the UK which said the study showed that 70% of British people hated their work. This is not just factory workers, white collar workers, business executives. They didn't like their jobs. Imagine what wasted lives people live. And Britain is not unusual. Maybe 70% is high, but even in India or anywhere, you ask people, do you really love your work? And they won't say they love it. So I just feel that that's another way.
Yeah.
I can answer your question that ultimately, one should ask, I'll give you a philosophical what if question. Let's play a thought game. What if you went to the doctor and you were told by the doctor that you had only 3 months to live, how would you live? Then you came out and you said to yourself, now, how would you live your life? You certainly won't do an executive MBA at that stage. How would you live your life? And if you ask that question once in a while, what if you had one day to live? How would you spend that day? I think this is a lot of these questions people turn to religion, but we can also ask these questions of ourselves. We should ask that question because how you spend your hours is how you spend your days, and how you spend your days is how you spend your months, and how you spend your months is how you spend your life. That's your sum total of your life. And the mistake we make is we confuse being busy with making a life.
Excellent.
Seneca, the Roman senator, the Roman writer, said, while I was busy, life passed me by. Just think about that. While I was busy, life passed me by. Okay, so we are.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for that very interesting answer laced with a couple of stories there, especially the one with the story of Kamble. And but ultimately it goes through that framework which you explained. What is the science of happiness? The science of happiness is love yourself. I mean, love your work and also love the person that you're living with. So Kamble's story talks about the way he loved the work, and then some pearls of wisdom have come there. What if there's a customer on the other side of the call? I mean, that's a very, very powerful way of reflecting on what we should do or what we could have done. I'll quickly request Dr. Amit Badra to raise his question.
Thank you, Professor Sudhakar. Mr. Gurcharan Das, it has been an absolute pleasure listening to you. We have known you as the founder, CEO of Procter & Gamble India, and we have tremendous respect for you. And but now we know you as a celebrated author. Mr. Gulshan Das, I wanted some advice from you. I come from a university background. I used to be a part of a university. We had 37,000 students, and 75% were basically focused on two disciplines. One is computer science and engineering, and business management. And out of 13 schools, this was the focus. The wisdom was that the jobs are only in these two sectors. Now, what you are saying is that follow what you want to do. I want to be a cricketer. I should try to be a good cricketer, and so on. But the question is that are there really opportunities in so many fields? In every field, we are a nation of 1.4 billion people. Do we really have opportunities in all these fields?
That's a very good question, Amit,
Amit, yeah, that's right.
if I may call you.
Of
Amit,
course.
that's a very good question. And you're right that there are more opportunities in certain fields than in others. And you must remember when I was growing up, it was the days of the licensed Raj, and there were no opportunities in business at all of any kind. Only decent jobs were government jobs. There were no other decent jobs. And now things are different. I can say maybe the highest paying jobs are not those, but a lot of young people I know are taking chances. They're becoming they're doing. I met somebody who's just curating events. He enjoys curating events. Now, who thought that would be a career that you could have? It's got nothing to do with computers, nor really big business management or anything. It's and there are others. I mean, I see particularly now with e-commerce, the opportunities that have opened up online to do so much podcasts and so on, and people are doing it. So while these are not safe subjects in that sense. You have to love something, but you can create, there's a revenue model that one can create in most activities. The other point, of course, is that you may love something, but you've also got to do it and face the fact that if you're not good at it, then get out of it because you're not going to be happy trying just loving to do something which you're a failure at. You've got to be able to perform in that work, but you've got to try it out and see how good you are at it. Now that's what I called a bit of risk taking. And when I quit engineering, I mean, it was a bit of my parents were nervous. My mother was very nervous that what was I doing out there, and according to her, wasting my time. But today, the reason I can write the books I write is because of that undergraduate liberal education. And in India, Ashoka University is one that gives you that kind of education. So I would just tell people that there's a bigger world. And yes, there you have to be a little, journalists and others do. There are people who make a living doing other things. So I would take a risk at least. Pause, as Sudhakar said, pause for a few minutes, live an examined life. You may choose then to go back to do what your parents want you to do. But I do feel there are more opportunities there. But you've asked a very good question, I must say. So I don't have a pat answer for you.
Right, sir. Thank you very much. Very insightful.
Thank you, sir. So, Dr. Amit Badra, please stay back. I have a question to you. If you recall, the difficulty of being good as a book was discussed by our founder of ICFAI group, NJ SSV, on the Goa beach. Do you recall that?
I'm afraid no.
So the book was released at that time, and we had some time to actually pause and reflect. So three of us were walking on the beach in Goa. We had gone there for a review meeting, and then our founder started telling the gist of it. And then at the end of the discussion, or after coming back from Goa, I purchased that book. So he explained that book in simple language to both of us, that we got endeared towards the core concept of the book, and then we managed to read the book very quickly after that. So I thought I'll recall that moment. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Sudhakar. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I'll now request Ms. Meera Chakravarti to raise a question.
Namaste, Professor Das. Just to give a little bit of introduction, I was in the chair Sanskrit department in Bangalore University, and then later on shifted to Jain University Cultural Studies department, and then I was also a member of Karnataka State Women's Commission. And now with my ground experiences that I have from women, with a lot of women's work, we have been in the women's movement more than 40 years. I would like to, impressive though your talk was very much. One thing here I would like to quote from your humanitarian concerns, which is the dharma, artha, kama, moksha are really values. And Kautilya mentions that. But my question is that how many companies do you find having this balance between making a life and making a living?
Okay.
And I ask this because the markets have become so violent that they are almost eliminating people as such. And this humanitarian concern of dharma, artha, kama, moksha are not to be seen at all. Whereas Kautilya starts with this aphorism that prithivya labhe palanecha, that is, if you have to do business or if you have to live, both making life as well as making a living, then you will have to nourish, you will have to cherish the wealth of the earth. So Prithvi here stands for both wealth as well as you know, since you yourself as a Sanskrit scholar, that one Sanskrit term has a lot of meanings. So why has this spirit totally gone away? Is it because of colonial hegemony that we were brought up in that situations? Why have we not? Why don't we not discuss the entrepreneurs like Dwarkanath Tagore, Tagore's grandfather, or Bajaj, or these kind of people who have been, during the colonial rule, have been doing marvelous business. Prince Dwarkanath Tagore, if you just see how many businesses he could handle. Sorry to be lengthier, but I stop here. Thank you so much.
No, I think you've really linked this a little bit to this history series that I have edited. Dwarkanath Tagore figures in one of the series. There
Mhm.
are merchants from Tamilakam. There are,
Yes.
there are merchants, the Chettiars. There's a
Yeah.
new volume that's come on the Chettiars. These
Mhm.
business communities, the stories of these business communities are very, very interesting.
Thank you.
And also, I think that the notion, yes, we're living in a commercial, competitive age. That's what we live in. And you can't blame people for wanting to be successful, and that's fine. I mean, they should be successful, those who do well. But what I was basically pointing out that there's what is success really we are discussing. And success is not just money or power, but it's also concerns the full life. And you pointed this out in when you talked about the Purusharths. So I just think that this should be what you're saying should be something that ICFAI and other education institutions should have courses in history talking about, I mean, right from the Roman times, Roman trade. India had a surplus. Pliny, the
Yes.
senator,
Yes.
one
Mm.
ship from Rome came to a South Indian port every day. And 65% of Rome's bullion was being lost to India because
Yeah.
Rome
Yes.
used to buy so much from India, cotton textiles and perfumes and spices.
Yeah.
But Indians didn't want anything that Romans made. So all this story is a very inspiring story for a young person. The story of the mouse merchant should be part of the startup course.
Yes. Yes.
Why? There's a lot to be mined in our tradition, Kautilya, and the first volume in our series is the Arthashastra, which
Mm.
has its wisdom, which Meera just talked about. So I would say that this is a challenge and this is an opportunity for us. And I would not give up at all. I think that we are in India, we're just coming into our own now. We're very young. Our economic history began in 1991, not in 1947. So we are 25, 30 years old at the most. And
Mm.
and so we have still, we can keep going at about 7% uh, growth rate. Our middle class, which is today 30%, will become 60% by
Yeah.
2047.
Yeah. Yes.
That's
All right.
where we want to be.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great, sir. Thank you. Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. I'll now request our friend Benedict to raise his question.
Good evening, sir.
Hello,
So,
Benedict.
hi. Uh, Loved all your last 1 hour of wisdom. So, I think I'm asking you a hard question here. The puzzle I face, and I think a lot of people face, is that we have been told to have a strong goal and pursue it hard and believe, pursue it hard, or believe in the universe's plan for you or allow the flow to happen. So, which one should you believe? And if you're told no, balance it out, that is a tough ask. So how does one?
Well, I knew Benedict would ask the most difficult question. And all I can say is what I believe. I believe the universe has no plan for you, Benedict.
Okay.
You have to create your own plan. Life, I mean, unless you are a believer and you believe in a certain religion, and you believe in a certain God, then you have it, that makes it a little easier for you. But if you're like me, I believe so far that gods were created by human beings. Human beings create their own lives, not the universe doesn't create your life. And so you have the agency, the freedom, the responsibility to create your own life. You can make your own life. And I suspect you have made it, Benedict.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Benedict. You cannot ask this question on August 2nd.
Yeah, sure.
You can't ask here and also there.
Yeah, no, I won't.
So what it means is for all the friends who are going to join us at the Hyderabad Business Literature Festival, you will give more opportunities for the audience to ask Sir those questions. Okay.
Yes.
Benedict has done something interesting. He has another session. Ask me a question. I think that session is called something like
It's called Ask Me Anything.
Ask Me Anything. There. So that's at 4:30.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
There's 1 to 1:30, and there's 4:30 to 5:30 or something like that.
yeah.
4 to 5
So
in the afternoon.
yeah,
Where yes, ask me anything.
yeah, it's a town hall, so it's a free flow
Great.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Great. Look forward to it. Thank you so much, Benedict, for curating the festival. We are planning to attend that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Okay. Well, what we understand is that there are questions because it's an interesting topic, and there are questions because it affects all of us, and also there are questions because it looks like it's a good solution. There is a lot of investment of yourself into these solutions, and therefore, to clarify, a lot of questions keep coming. I'm very happy that we could manage to get a lot of questions. For the time being, what I suggest is that I will suspend my usual attempt of summarizing this session because it's like showing a candle to the moon or sun. So I will not do that. What I want to enjoy, sir, is the pure original style of telling the lessons through these stories and through the memoirs that you have had right from childhood to at this stage of life, where you're influencing large number of people from all walks of life. We'll keep it at that. We will read your books. We will listen to you in the Lit Fests. And the next one, as I said, is coming on 2nd of August. We'll meet you there in person as well. In that festival, we are also launching another book where I am a co-author. This is First Forever. It's a biography on our founder of ICFAI. So I invite participants to join to listen to that story as well. So thank you so much, sir, for this time that you have spent with us. I cannot thank you enough actually for agreeing to do this session. Usually what happens is a lot of time goes into scheduling a session as big as this, but you're kind enough to agree to our request very quickly. I'm grateful to you, sir, and also thank Benedict for providing this connect or the reconnect. Dr. Prasad, would you like to ask any question, because you prepared a large number of questions and then the time was actually not sufficient? You can take one question and we'll close it after that.
I think what has already been said itself has a lot in it. So I don't think at this stage I would like to get into details. I think we need to digest what has been said. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sir, if there's anything, I'll email it to you. And I would like to follow your methodology that, for a long part of the day, you are not becoming agenda of someone else's activities, or you are not allowing yourself to be part of someone else's agenda. That's a very powerful thing that will remain etched in my mind as we close this session. not taking phone calls, not talking to anybody, sitting down every single day to write from 6 to 12, very, very powerful practice in your life. I think that's a very, very big motivating factor as well. To stay focused and keep working on what you love and what you like day in and day out. And that becomes part of your life, and automatically, that is called making a life. Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much for these lessons. See you again on 2nd of August. Ladies and gentlemen, keep browsing, keep reading the books written by Mr. Gurcharan Das, and you will be immensely benefited. Even if you read the summaries, even if you read the book reviews done, which is the easiest way to actually capture. And then from there, if it catches your imagination, go and read the full book. And but for the latest book, of course, you will have to meet him in the Lit Fest and then take it up from there onwards. So next week again, we will be joined by another leader who talks about the glass ceiling and the women in technology. We will listen to that story as well. But till then, keep learning about Gurcharan Das ji and come back for learning much more on 25th of July at 6:30 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend and good night.